My name is Mr. Gerth. I'm a teacher at St. Paul Lutheran School in Hamel, Illinois, and as of a couple months ago, I'm also its principal. I've been in the classical game for 4 years, so 2017 is when I started. I graduated from CUW in 2010. I think I've got more information for you on who I am, but I'm going to be telling you this morning about teaching middle school math. And so some of you may not be teaching middle school, but it'll be helpful for you nevertheless to kind of know where your kids, your students will be headed. And if you have people in high school, it'll be helpful for you to kind of look back and see what they, I believe, should be getting. So here's kind of an outline of what I want to do. I want to try to keep this as practical as possible, so I'm hoping to have about 20 minutes of demonstration, only 10 minutes of introduction, and then about 10 minutes of questions. So if you've got lots of questions, I'll be happy to answer those. I've only been doing Saxon for about 4 years, but I've got lots of experience, and math is my background. That's what I graduated from CUW in, and I spent my first 7 or so years at a more progressive Lutheran school, and I did mostly high school level math. So as I'll say here, well, 4th grade I only taught here at St. Paul Hamel, but I've gone all the way up the spectrum, about as high as you can go in high school, all the way up to AP Calculus BC. Now, I didn't do so well teaching AP Calculus BC, but I have done it before. All right. I'm also a graduate student at a college in Moscow, Idaho called New St. Andrews College. Those of you who are familiar with Douglas Wilson might recognize that name. That's the college that he and his ilk started out there. So I'm still learning a lot. Like all of us, we're still learning a lot here in the classical Lutheran education area. And hopefully I can give you a little bit of more perspective since I'm a graduate student. So let me give you a little bit of overview. This is what I do, and this is what I recommend you do with your Saxon math curriculum. First of all, you need to assign all the problems. Don't do evens or odds. That kind of defeats the purpose of the course. There are kinds of lots of questions, and maybe people will complain about them or parents will complain about them, but give it a year. Really be strict with it. You got to assign all the problems. Eventually, you'll hear no complaints. I hear no complaints from my parents. All right. They do need to get an assignment every day. Do not skip the investigations. I do use notebooks. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a notebook to you. The one that I was going to give you, they accidentally disposed of. I do have some samples that I can show you saved online. But basically what that means when I say notebooks, all their assignments are in a notebook. So they have a math notebook, and they just open that up. Here's lesson 1, and they do all their problems there in that notebook. They turn the page. Here's lesson 2. And I don't care if they do back-to-back. You know, they don't have to skip a page or not do the backside or whatever. However they want to do it. But it's all in a notebook. Don't use loose leaf paper. Doesn't work because they lose the paper. Or the other thing that I really like about notebooks, and this comes from Joshua Gibbs, if you know him, from the Circe Institute, a loose leaf sheet of paper, after it gets a grade, gets crumpled up and tossed into the trash. Okay, if that's all it's worth, it wasn't, valuable. So with a notebook, they can't really do that, and so they keep it, it's valuable. So think about it in that perspective as well. The power-ups I do a little bit differently. So, they've got a power-up every single lesson, and then they've got a mental math section on those power-ups, and then they've got the problem solvings. Now, if I had all the time in the world, I would do the mental math and I would do the problem solving, but I actually omit those. So I let them only do the power-up section at the top. And by the way, I can show you examples of that if you'd like. It's basically, just math facts. It gets a little more complicated in Course 2 and Course 3, which is the 7th and 8th grade class, respectively. But I don't use any class time to do the power-ups. That's their own responsibility. So I hand them the power-up, and I say, this is your responsibility, you go do that. If they choose not to, and some of them have chosen not to, well, that comes back to bite them because on the tests, they have a power-up section. That power-up section they see exactly in those power-ups that I hand out to them daily. If they choose not to do it, well, then they don't do well on that part of the test. So that's kind of the way that I make sure that they do that. Grade all of your homework in class. I'm going to make a little bit of an apology for that in just a moment. Not only will this save you time, but it's just better for the students as well. So this is not just it's better for me because I'm lazy. It's actually better for the students to grade in class. All right? I spend very little time lecturing. If you're spending more than 5 minutes explaining a concept, you're probably not doing something right, but there may be some exceptions to that, especially toward the end of Course 3. It does get a little bit more intense, but I try not to spend too much time lecturing. All right? So, what are some advantages to grading in class? Well, first of all, the students get instant feedback. What I had done at my last call, and this again was for high schools, I would grade all the homework myself, but the problem with that is then you collect all these papers and you bring them back the next day, and then again they crumple it up and they throw it away right away. Or even if they do kind of look it over, it's not fresh in their mind anymore. So by grading it in class, it's right there in front of them and they get that feedback immediately, which is very, very, very important. So that instant feedback, very important. All right. It has more meaning to them, and what I mean by that, that's what I'm looking for. And what I mean by that, there's going to be opportunities for you, and I think I'm going to have this in one of my other bullet points. There's going to be opportunities for you to teach while you're grading. And when you do things deductively, where you sit up in front of class and you explain the procedure, okay, class, today we're going to learn how to graph on the coordinate plane. Here's all the things you need to do. It's very abstract for them. But if you do it in the opposite way, okay, class, you did this last night, now here's the way you should have done it, that's actually going to have a little bit more meaning to them. Now, you might argue, well, wait a second, then they got to get it wrong, and that's all bad. And I'm going to tell you how I score the various assignments as well. And what you're probably thinking, well, then you can't score the assignments very heavily. Well, that's kind of it, right? So you have to think about homework in the same way that you'd think, in the same way that a coach is going to think about practice, right? You're not going to punish the student, you're not going to punish the basketball player for having poor layup form during practice, right? So you're going to correct and you're going to fix it. A lot of teachable moments here, kind of connecting to the meaning, because there'll be a lot of students who maybe think they should have got the right answer, and when it gets revealed to them in class that that's not the case, that's enlightening to them, like, whoa, how did I do that? Why did I do this wrong? How can I fix it? And so this is just a great opportunity for you then to step in and help out. Now, here's a major reason why I like to do this. I'm getting this from Quintillion. I've added maybe one word here, but these are the 4 things that you got to have in every class, whether it's math or Latin or history. Your students need to be reading, they need to be writing, they need to be speaking, and they need to be listening, all right? So by grading in class, as I'm going to show you in our demonstration, your students will be doing all 4 of those things every single day. They're going to be reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And like I said, grading in class is going to allow you to do that. All right. I know I'm going fast here, and I can always slow down or come back to this later. But like I said, what I really want to do is make sure we have lots of demonstration time and lots of question time. So feel free to maybe slow me down, or we can come back to it later. All right, so how I grade in class is very simple. I exchange. Now, last year I was unable to exchange because of various COVID rules, and it can be done without exchanging, but I think it's better done when exchanging. You do have to have some procedures set in place. Okay, so I make sure my students, the only time you ever write on someone else's paper is if it's wrong, and all you do is you put an X through the number. That's it. So that does take a little practice, and you do have to hold them accountable a little bit, because you're going to have some kids that are going to want to doodle. You're going to want to have some kids that are going to want to ask a question every single time. You know, number 1, here's the answer. Raise your hand. Number 2, he'll raise his hand. Number 3, he'll raise his hand. So you have to, kind of teach them how to do this efficiently. But exchanging, number 1, helps them to be more honest and accountable, but most importantly, it helps them to see other people's work. And especially in math, where you've got different ways of doing problems, different ways of looking at problems, it's helpful to have other people's work in front of you. Okay? You've got some smart students. You want to use those smart students to help sort of mentor your struggling students, you might say. And so that's another reason to do that. They'll exchange, and that struggling student is going to be able to see this is how it's done. All right? Students will read the entire original problem from the book, and then it says, then share the answer that's in front of them. So I do make them read every single problem, 1 through 30. Sometimes we run out of time, and so then what I'll do is I'll do as much as I can, and then let's say the last 5 problems, I'll just read them the answers. But I really try not to do that because I think every single problem there is important. So they read the original problem all out loud to the entire class and the answer that's in front of them, whether it's right or wrong. All right? So again, speaking and listening right there, and the reading, of course. You can't see this. This got cut off here. It says spend time during grading to review, practice, assess, preview, and teach. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna demonstrate that. I'm gonna repeat that bullet point since unfortunately it got cut off. We're gonna spend time during grading. So you're thinking of this grading period not just as let's get a grade on this and move on, but rather it's a teaching tool. You're spending time during grading to review, practice, assess, preview, and teach, in no particular order, of course. So again, that's review, practice, assess, preview, and teach. All right. Now, my lovely wife handed out some whiteboards and marker boards to most of you. These are my marker boards and markers, so I would appreciate you giving them back to me. But this is kind of a staple in all of my classes. I try to use these whiteboards in every single class period. All right. Now, I don't always get around to it, but the more often that I use these, the better. All right. So I'll use these in math, of course, which is what we're going to be doing. So for our demonstration, I'm going to have to leave my presentation, and we're going to go here. And I was afraid of that, but maybe I can do something about that. All right. So actually, I have Saxon. This is course 2. And yeah, this is going to be a problem. I don't know if I can fix this.
May I interrupt
Yes.
just a second? When you're saying course 1, course 2, so I teach from the homeschool Saxon, and so they go like 4, 5, 5, 6, 6,
Yeah.
7, 7, 8. Do you have a correlation when you say Saxon?
Yeah. So there's 2 strands of Saxon. Maybe there's 3. When I say course 1, I think that's 5, 6. 6, 7 is course 2. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that.
It's the big number first, that's all.
The big number is first.
Yeah.
Yes. 6, 5,
6, 5.
So there's 6.
Okay, so 6 and 5. Okay, so Saxon 6, 5 would be course 1. And then Saxon 7, 6 would be course 2. Saxon 8, 7 would be course 3. All right. I don't have an opinion on which one is better, by the way.
And John Saxon explained that numbering when I went to one of his presentations, but I cannot remember why he did that.
Yeah, well, see, here's the problem. These are all big. Okay. And I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so maybe we can fit it in. Yeah, this is unfortunate because, here we go. So why don't we just do these 2 problems here. Now, I've given you all whiteboards, but you'll have to imagine, and actually if you've got a piece of paper, you'll have to imagine that you've done these problems on a piece of paper. But one thing that I could do here is, well, let me just say this. If you got a piece of paper, use your paper to write down the answers to 9 and 10. Feel free to do 9 or 10. You know, I'm not going to grade you on this. I don't feel like I'm forcing you to do anything. But the idea here is I want you to do these problems, and then maybe we can exchange with a partner. We can read them and go over them. And then I can kind of show you what I would do in a classroom setting. All right? Now, don't feel bad if you don't know the answers. There's no pressure. There's no, no judgment here. And in fact, if you don't know the answers, that might also be helpful for us, because then I can demonstrate what I would do in that situation, or how I would help out an individual student. All right. So again, this is course 2, and that I guess would be Saxon 7, 6. I've got a lesson number around here somewhere, lesson 39. Lesson 39, there's 120 lessons in the Saxon curriculum that I use. Yes, I was able to finish the book this year. You do have to move along, but I'm telling you, especially my kids who've been in this program for 3 or 4 years, they're just used to it. It's just what they do. So there's usually not any pushback from parents or from students. I will say if you're just switching to Saxon, you're probably going to have a rough year or two because it takes them a while to kind of acclimate. Wow, 30 problems a day. You've got an assignment just about every single day. You've got a test every week. There's a lot to do.
How much time are you expecting them to do for homework?
So that's a good question. I should have mentioned this. Last year I had 3 different Saxons. So I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So I had course 1, course 2, and course 3 in a 45-minute class. 45-minute class. I spent 15 minutes with one group and then 15 minutes with the other 2. So the idea there is, okay, for course 1, I'm addressing you first, we're engaging you first, we're doing the correction here, whatever, for 15 minutes. You do have to move. And then the other group, let's say your course 2, you've got a half an hour of class time to use to finish your math. Now, some of... For the next day. Yes, that's right. Yeah, they need to come to school with the assignment done, because it's a problem if they're trying to finish it before just before we start grading. That's a problem.
How do you make sure it's done?
I haven't had a problem with it, and that does bring up a good point. Just because I do something doesn't mean that you should, or just because I don't do something doesn't mean that you shouldn't, because we all have to adapt to our individual needs. So you and your class may know, okay, this student is very irresponsible and, sometimes he doesn't do his homework on time. So then what I would do is go to that individual student and say, here's the plan. You're going to show me your homework at 8:20 a.m. or whatever. And if it's done, great. If it's not, then that's what you're doing during recess. So you just have to kind of individualize it. Like I said, I haven't had that problem, especially with math, but if I do run into that problem, I think that's how I would handle it. Yes.
So, and I know you're talking about you have multiple sections in the same group, in the same room. So do you just expect them, the 6th graders, to read the lesson on their own?
That's right.
And so they have to get all of the teaching from the lesson itself?
Yes. And when I do get a question, so let's say they're working, it's later in the day, it's a different class, they've got some work time for whatever reason, they say, okay, Mr. Gerth, how do I do this problem? Because they will do that. When you have 3 different classes, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, there's often time for them to do other homework or whatever. So a lot of my students will finish their math, but they're also working on it quite a bit throughout the day. Usually the very first thing I'll ask them is, okay, where did you go to the lesson? So if you look here, here's number 10, in little tiny numbers here in parentheses says 33. That's a reference to them, okay? I say, did you go to lesson 33 first? And sometimes they'll say, oh no. Okay, I say, I'm not gonna help you until you do. You have to stick to that. You have to make them go back and look for themselves. Now, they may have done that, and they may have given an honest effort, and they still don't get it. No problem. Then I'm going to step in and help. When you do that, when you do step in and help, I very rarely will tell them stuff. Instead, I will ask them things. And what I'm really trying to do is to get them to be very self-independent so that I don't have to stand up here and lecture for 10 minutes to get them to learn a math concept. Now that takes some work, and it also takes some knowledge. So if you don't have a math background, it might be a little intimidating at first when a student asks a question for some math concept that you may or may not be very comfortable with. Okay, I've been doing this for a while. I've been teaching math for a while. So I usually don't have any issues when a student says, hey, how do I do this? And then on the fly, I can come up with the right questions to lead them to the right answer. But that may not be true of everyone. So don't feel like you have to always, sort of Socratically question them to the right answer. You can also, just, okay, let's go through this example together. Let's try to get the answer together or something like that, okay? Yeah, these are really good questions. I'm trying to go fast, so I know I'm missing some things. So feel free to jump in and help me out. All right, so I don't see many pencils moving, so I'm going to assume that everyone's finished. If you've got a partner or someone next to you, go ahead and exchange. All right, so this is one thing you got to practice with your students. This would not be allowed in my classroom. See how everyone's talking, right? And now we're wasting time. If that happens, that is a no. That cannot happen in the classroom. You have 15 minutes. That exchange has to happen. So I'm not trying to make you feel bad. So don't feel guilty or anything. But I'm teaching you this cannot happen in the classroom. There's no way you're going to get anything done. All right. So you've exchanged. So now what I'm going to do, and you can do it however you want. Last year I bought a really fancy set of dice. You can roll dice. Whoever's number comes up, you can have them go. Usually what I do is I just go to one end of the room and I say, okay, you get to go first. So I'm going to start with that gentleman in the back. Remember, I want you to read the entire question. So start up here, then here, share your answer that you see, and then I also want you to do part B as well. So if you may, or if you would.
Name the number of shaded circles. A is a decimal number, B is a mixed number.
And just share your answer.
For A, 2.5. For B, 2.5.
Okay, 2.5 and 2.5. Good. All right, did anyone have something different? All right, go ahead.
Different answers?
Yes.
Seeing it as 2/3, 2 out of 3 are shaded. So for A, 0.66, and for B, 2/3.
Wrong. So you marked that wrong. Now, they would know. So they would know. Okay, that's wrong. However, I was expecting maybe someone to put 2 5/10. Did someone put 2 5/10?
And then she simplified.
Okay. So if it only says 2 5/10, wrong. It's incorrect. And I'll always tell them, you gotta simplify, unless it says otherwise, okay? And by the way, that prepares them for the test, because what am I gonna do on the test? I'm gonna mark it wrong if they don't simplify it. So they know, they don't have to ask me that question on a test. They know they're gonna have to simplify it. Let's see, did anyone put 2.50? That'd be kind of weird. But you can see what's going to happen here. You're going to get a couple different kinds of answers. Some of them may be right, but this gives you an opportunity to talk and to teach. Okay? Mm-hmm.
So being a woman and sensitive, what about the child who has the wrong answer and everybody knows they got it wrong, so everybody's like, oh.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, say we have two students, they're always exchanging. Mm-hmm. This one always has it right, this one always has it wrong.
Well, I guess you'd have to figure that out individually, and maybe you'd have to find someone different to exchange with. Maybe if you've only got like 2 or 3 kids in the classroom, that might be difficult to do. And in that case, if you've got a smaller class, like let's say you've got 5 to 10, maybe don't even exchange.
Thank you.
Well, I was going to say, I actually do grading every other day this way, but I don't exchange, because there are some benefits to seeing your own mistakes as well. Right. So you could sometimes exchange and then sometimes not, just so that those students that feel self-conscious don't always feel like their wrong answers are in front of them.
And they want to exchange with one
Yeah, you always got to.
so they can read the good answers.
I'm giving you some suggestions here. You got to adapt it to your own.
And you can always check for
use.
completion.
Yes.
If they wrote 2.50, would you count wrong?
Good question. I don't think I would mark that wrong. But it does give you an opportunity to ask, okay, students, what's the difference between 2.5 and 2.50?
Significant digits?
And I'm not gonna answer that. I'm just gonna leave that hanging. That's another tool that I use all the time. I don't always necessarily answer their questions or the questions that I ask, or I don't even say it. I'll let them thinking about it. I'll let them consider it. And that's kind of what I mean by preview, all right? Someone said significant digits, all right? That's something that I'll talk about occasionally, and I'll bring it up, and I'll say, someday in chemistry, you're gonna need to know about significant digits. I wonder why you'd want to know. I wonder why a chemist would have 2.500, and that would be the expected result. And then I'll pause, and then I'll say, okay, anyways, let's move on.
Well, there is one lesson in course 2 that actually covers it.
Course 3, yeah.
Well, course 2 also, because
Oh.
I teach course 2, and it covers it. But then it doesn't give any problems on it for the rest of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It just talks about it. Let's go.
And then here I've got number 10, so we'll go to the next gentleman.
Yes, I can see most of it. Around 0.916666 to the nearest hundredth. I don't know how many sixes I got.
Yeah.
Did I get it right?
You did.
To the nearest
fine, that's
hundredth
fine, yeah.
with 0.92.
Okay.
And to round it to the nearest 100,000th would be 0.916667.
Okay. Good. Did anyone get something different? All right.
I have a question. Do you have to have the 0 in front? What if you just put 9?
I don't require that.
Okay.
I will always do that on the board. I will always put 0 point because up here on the whiteboard, it's sometimes hard to see that decimal point, so the 0 just helps. And I will actually tell them that. I'll say that exact same thing.
Quick question on do you put the book numbers up on the PowerPoint? Okay,
No.
so you just have them read it out of there.
Right. I didn't want to bring all my course 2 books for everyone. They've all got their own textbook, obviously, so they just read right from their textbook, and that's where they get their questions from. So yeah, this is kind of hard because you have to squint, especially if you're in the back, especially if you've got, all these little tiny numbers here. But you'd have your own book in front of you. Where was I going to go with that? Oh, did he say the number right?
You did.
I said, tell him to say it again because
He said 0.9666666, however many sixes are here.
1, 6, or 0.
0.9166666. I've got 5 sixes there.
Okay, but that's not what you said. You said a 7 somewhere, but how many sixes did you?
I was going back to the original problem. I don't know. What did you say, sir, for your answer? What did you have?
Erased it. Okay, 0.91667, I believe.
That's yeah.
Isn't it like
Let's see. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths.
10,000, 100.
All right, so we need to round to this 100,000ths place. This 6 tells us to push that up to a 7. Your final answer should be 0.91666.
It's not 666.
So,
All right. Okay.
So,
Did he say that number right?
yes.
For sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, it depends. Okay, so I would make him say it a different way. How would I make him say it?
9?
And I sometimes like to do this. I've put sort of an artificial space here to help them read it a little bit better. Okay, but we also do know because of this context here how we would say this. 91,667 hundred thousandths. Now let's say I'm getting a bunch of blank stares, like I am getting a couple blank stares right now. I'd say, okay, class, repeat after me. 91,667 hundred thousandths.
91,667 hundred thousandths.
Good. 91,667 hundred thousandths.
91,667 hundred thousandths.
Good. All right. Do you guys know why that's so important? Anyone know why it's so important? Well, here's what I like to say. What number is that? 1/10. 1/10. Let's change that into a fraction. What number is that? Isn't that what you said here? Okay, notice the connection there. So if you say the decimal right, look how easy it is to switch it over into a fraction. All right? Now, you can maybe compromise. Again, you have to adapt to your own individual situations. You only have 15 minutes. You might say, this is lesson 39. They've been doing this since, since like grade 5 math or something like that. You may know that, hey, we don't really need to say 1/10 here. We can just say 0.1. So just adapt to your own individual needs. But you can see the purpose or the point of me making them say things correctly. All right? Now, each of you have a whiteboard. Please take that out. Well, maybe not each of you have a whiteboard, but most of you do. All right, everyone. All right, everyone on your whiteboard, please do number 15. Everyone on your whiteboard, please do number 15. When you have the answer, please hold it up. And when I say good and point at you, you may put your whiteboard down. Good? Good? Good. I see someone doodling back there. Do not allow that. If you catch them doodling, take the whiteboard away. Good. 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 Incorrect. Good. Don't feel bad if you get it wrong. This is the purpose. You want to get it wrong now. And this is part of the teaching thing of your students. You want to tell them you want to get it wrong now. Don't get it wrong in the assignment. Don't get it wrong in the test. So don't feel bad. Good. 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 Incorrect. All right. Correct. More doodling. Don't do that. These are tools, and as teachers, you guys know this. You got to make sure they're using the tools correctly. They're children, and they're going to find ways to use them incorrectly. All right. So what I'm trying to do here is not make anyone feel bad. I'm just trying to teach you to do things properly, so that you don't have some of the same problems that maybe I had. You got it right. Good. And make them get it right. It's very important that everyone gets it right. If they just can't get it, which may happen. I'm going to give you a slightly harder problem here, timing allowing. I hope we don't mind me going till 12, maybe. Is that okay? All right, so then maybe I can get 50 minutes. Then what you can do, and depending, if everyone gets it right, just move on to the next problem, no big deal. If you have some people that struggle with it, you might want to run through the problem. Especially with this, because they're going to see this problem again and again and again. That's called does anyone know, what is that called?
Ratio, proportion.
Proportion. A proportion is two equal ratios. You're right, there is a ratio in there. So if someone were to tell me, Mr. Gerth, that's a ratio, I would say, well, almost, that's a proportion with two equal ratios. Vocabulary, very important here, okay? How would you solve this? You can take a hand, you can have someone explain it. Someone might say, I saw some whiteboards that did this. What's this called? Cross multiplying. Sure, you can do it that way, but there's an easier way, isn't there? Yes, please reduce that first fraction. 8/12 is equal to 2/3. That's equal to 6 over x. So notice I only changed that first ratio, right? I reduced the first ratio. Now we can say 2 times what gets you to 6? So therefore, x is equal to 3 times 3. X is equal to 9. Get in the habit of putting a box or a circle around your answer, please. Okay. Next, you don't have to grab problems from the book either. So one thing that I like to do, especially with my Course 3 students, so I'm thinking ahead to high school level math. They've got to know how to graph. So Course 3 math, I'm going to just give them problems to graph. Some of you have some graph boards that might be helpful for you.
What part of the lesson day do you do this section in?
It depends. And usually, some point in my day, I've got some extra time. Not even in math class, I'll have them get out their whiteboards and we'll do some math.
So do you have 6, 7, and 8 all day long?
That's right. Yes. For those of you who are just the math teacher, I pity you. I would much rather have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all day long. That way, they're my class and I can do whatever I want with them, including, all right, everyone, take out your whiteboards. Let's do some math. All right, anyways, please graph this equation. All right, y equals 3x minus 1. If you don't know how to do this, don't feel bad. You don't have to do anything. I do this all the time with my Course 3 students. They got to know how to graph. And 3x minus 1. Good. 3x minus 1. Good. 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 All right. Good. All right. For the sake of time here, all I'm going to do is run through this problem. I know that there are some people in this room that did not know how to graph. So as the teacher, looking at some students with, they don't know what they're doing that looks correct, this is what I would do. Okay, students, raise your hand. How can we always graph an equation? I always start them with this. How can we always graph an equation? Doesn't matter what kind of equation it is. How can we do that? And they know the answer. Make a t-table. I say, make a t-table. All right, what is that? Looks like this. So they would have memorized that. They've got sort of this, I don't know what you would call it, instinct. I've trained them to answer certain questions. So I will ask very specific questions, and they know what the answer is.
It's called drilling it in.
Yes. Okay. So How do we always graph an equation? And they would say, usually this enthusiastically too, make a t-table. All right. Okay, here's my t-table. Now what do I do? And usually someone would raise their hand. 0, 1, and 2. Okay, sure, we can do that. All right. If x is equal to 0, what must y equal? Thank you. If x is equal to 1, what must y equal? And if x is equal to 2, then y is 5. Okay. What does each row represent, or what does each row represent? A coordinates, a point. Each row represents a point, which we now go ahead and plot on our coordinate plane. You guys all have that in front of you. Well, most of you do, because I don't have all graph boards. You put those points on your board, and you connect them with a line. Okay. A lot of different ways you can do this. What I really like to do, though, so some of you have some completed graphs, is that right? Okay. And then I've also got this information. What's the difference between 5 and 2? 3. What's the difference between 2 and -1? 3. Huh. I wonder if that's a coincidence. I don't answer that question. I just ask. I wonder if that's a coincidence. Okay. Some of you have some completed graphs. Where does your line cross the y-axis? I wonder if that's a coincidence. And that's sort of another trained phrase that I have for them. They know that, no, it's not a coincidence. There actually is something going on there. I'm always kind of thinking ahead. And so when we get to the section of slope-intercept form, they kind of already know it. And if they don't already know it, that's the moment kind of when it clicks. All right. So I'm just giving you kind of a couple little tricks here and there, and I know I'm kind of running out of time. So go ahead.
I always want to be in your class. I love the way you teach.
Yeah.
But the next step then is, and God is a God of order. How awesome is that? You know, that's really cool.
All right. So a lot of different things I could do at this point, but I think what I'm going to do is just take some questions. Are there any questions for me? Mm-hmm.
How do you record the grades?
Good question. Thank you.
Is it like an A, B?
Here's what I do. This is totally arbitrary for simplicity. How do I record grades? This is kind of arbitrary, so you can adapt this however you want, but I find it works really well. The grades have turned out, I think, fairly. Each assignment is worth 10 points. Each assignment is worth 10 points, and each one wrong takes a quarter of a point off. So 4 wrong is 1 off. So 4 wrong gives you a 9 out of 10. 8 wrong gives you an 8 out of 10, etc. Okay. If they get 16 or more wrong, I do make them stay in and do corrections. All right. 16 wrong that's too many, especially since they only got 5 new problems of new concepts. Right. The other 25 problems are all theoretically review, though usually it's ramped up a little bit in difficulty. But if they get 16 wrong, you gotta hold them accountable. All right. So assignments, 10 points each. All right. Tests, you get 1 a week. Tests are 100 points. All right. Again, this is kind of arbitrary. You only have 20 questions, so I count each question as 4 points. 4 times 20 is 80. Then there's the power-up test that goes along with it, and that's worth 20, and so that's a total of 100. I can give you a little bit more detail there if you want, but that way you've got sort of, the tests are worth a lot. Go ahead.
So for tests, okay, each problem's worth 4. If they do most of the math right and they show their work, but they get, maybe they forgot the negative sign or something like that. Is it wrong? They lose all 4 points, or
No.
they got partial?
No. And I'm trying to train them. You need to show your work, right? If you show your work, I can give you partial credit. Notice I said can, because if you show me incorrect work, that doesn't help you, right? But they do need to get into that habit of showing their work, especially, I'm thinking of dividing polynomials or something like that in high school level math. Like, that's a lot of work that they need to be able to show. They just need to get into that habit. And it's going to be subjective to each teacher how you take points off for various things. You've got 4 points to hand out. If they forget a negative sign, I take 1 point off. You might say, well, that's only a half a point. Well, that's your opinion. I think it's 1 point. They got to get those details right, okay? -8 degrees Celsius is a lot different than 8 degrees Celsius, right? Units, I will always take a point off, a full point out of 4 if they do not have their unit, okay? And you can be pretty picky on that. A lot of questions want not just miles, but miles per hour, okay? So make sure they've got the whole thing. However you want. If you want to take a half point off because they forgot per hour, again, that's kind of subjective. All right, any other questions?
I have a question about pacing. You said you had a test every week, and you have 5 lessons and a test. How do you fit that all in?
Let's see. So the test is actually like on the 6th day, if that makes sense. So if we test on Wednesday of 1 week, then the next week it'll be Thursday on the next week.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's any. It'd be so nice if it worked that way, but.
Yeah, there's the one by John Saxon is every 4 lessons, I think they have a test. So then you're able to have a test day. And I've thought about that, maybe like just figure out a way to have a test day, but I don't know if it's necessarily worth it.
My kids appreciate it.
Yeah, but then the problem is then you have to, like, after the test is over, then you just have to do the next lesson, and I've kind of gone back and forth on that.
Well, one little nice thing about course 1, 2, 3 is that after those 5 days of lessons, that test does not include like the very last lesson.
That's right.
So you actually could schedule it for like later in the day or whatever, and they just take it. It's not going to penalize them because they just learned that new concept that day.
That's right.
Are you collecting?
So do you weight the homework?
Put the homework in it?
Good question. What I had done in the past is on test days, I would collect the notebook and then grade that assignment with like 25 or 35 or whatever it is. I didn't do that last year, and I don't think I'm going to do that in the future. You're going to have maybe a student or two, you're going to want to be peeking at their notebook every other day, if not every day.
But the daily score, the daily homework score, you would like to...
Nope. So yes, but I don't collect it. What happens is they hand their books back, and they report it to me out loud.
Oh, okay.
So they'll say 8 wrong, 5 wrong, and then I just, I make a little note of that in my notebook. Now, again, what do you do with the kid that gets a really bad score? Well, the way I've always looked at it is, you don't want a really bad score, you better shape up.
Do the ABC, I mean, sometimes even they'll have A, B, C, D in one problem. There's still 30 problems. How do you do that with minus? So can they miss technically if there's 30 problems, can they miss 36?
They could miss more than that because I do count A as a full problem. Yep.
Even though you only give it 4 points on the test?
On a test, I will not. So, are you talking about it for homework?
I was talking about for homework, but I said for tests.
Yeah, for tests, I divide that up. So, like for 8, if you've got part A and part B is worth 2, part B is worth 2. On homework, I do say, yes, that is worth a full, whatever. You mark it both A and B wrong, you got to report to me 2 wrong. Okay, I'm a little bit more strict in some sense on the homework, but on the other hand, it's like, well, wait a second, it's really not worth as much as tests. And you want them to get things wrong on the homework, not on the tests. So make sure they know they got things wrong on the homework so that they get it fixed for the test. All right?
For the report card, is the homework weighted less than the tests are weighted?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't weight because I point things, and that gives me the weight itself. So tests are worth 100 points, assignments are worth 10, right? So it'll just naturally work itself out. What you could do is you could have a weight if you prefer, but just the way that I do it, I've never used a weight. Mm-hmm.
Do you let them correct their tests and return it for half credit?
Here's what I do on that. So I have had some poor tests in the past. What I do is, let's say I get someone with a D on their test, all right? I hand it back to them and I say, you're staying in for recess. You're going to correct this. All right, so there's got to be a tangible consequence for them. A D is not acceptable. Okay, here's your consequence. You are staying in for recess. And then they'll correct it. When they hand it back to me, I give them half credit back. But you got to be subjective on that. You got to understand your student and your parents and your own needs. That may be too generous, or that may be not generous enough.
And that's not clear across the board.
Oh, it's clear across the board for me. Yeah.
Like, what if the kid just sort of always plans on getting a D and then bumping it back up to a C?
I haven't had that issue, especially since I make them stay in for recess. That's a pretty harsh punishment for my kids. And again, maybe for you, that's not a harsh enough punishment, and so then you have to rethink that. But there's got to be a clear message sent, like a D is not acceptable. And if they're planning to up it to a C and that's good enough, then you got to rethink your giving points back. You might say, you're not getting points back. And maybe that'll, help them shape up a little bit. All right? Yes?
If you had more than 15 minutes for a grade, would you do a 5-minute teaching class? If you fit that in, would you be?
Oh, yeah. And so sometimes when I grade, I don't take up that full 15 minutes. In fact, most of the time I don't take up that 15 minutes when I'm grading. I mean, we move fast, but the kids are kind of trained, and you have to expect that. It's going to take you a week or two to kind of get up to speed. The good news with Saxon, those first 10 to 20 lessons, especially if they've done Saxon before, they're pretty easy. So you have a couple weeks to get them up to speed, as it were, to get them used to your procedures and expectations. So I usually do have some time where we can do a problem there in class, or I can talk about something in the future that they're going to learn. If you gave me an ideal class, I don't know. I really like having 3 different sections. Maybe if you gave me an hour, and then I would have maybe, 25 extra minutes to do problems and stuff like that. That'd be really nice. But, we all have to make compromises. We've all got different things we need to teach. So you just have to, think about what's most valuable and what can you maybe compromise on. All right. I see another hand. Yeah.
Would you ever, if you have one student, would you ever hand them the solutions manual and say, grade it yourself?
I would not. I would maybe hand it to their parents. That might be a decent strategy. Have their parents grade it.
Okay. And then what? So the parent grades it. Then what? Just give the assignment back to the kid and then say what?
I'm not sure what I would do. I'm not sure if I would actually do that. I said I might do that. I have some kids doing some math over the summer, in which case I've said to the parents, here's the answer key, right? But I trust those kids are going to do the right thing, and I trust the parents are going to do the right thing, so that they're going to...
There is the trust that the kid is going to, is it okay for them to grade by seeing answer if they've done their work?
I don't think so. Again, what I want is reading, speaking, listening, and writing. And so if you just hand them the answer key, then they don't get all that other stuff. Thank you everyone for your time and attention. With your whiteboards, if you could just pile them up here. This is my wife here. She'll take the markers and whiteboards and see that everything's okay. I'm keeping everyone from their lunch, so if you do have other questions, I'll be around.